be here or be on the call. So I think, there we go, that's working. So, hi, everyone. I'll get right to it. We try to do the meetings pretty official and thorough and hopefully efficiently. So good to see everyone. Often we've done these meetings, the August meetings, in person. Sorry, I'm just going to actually close my other door because I'm sure you can hear that. So. Okay. So, but we thought for this meeting that it would be best if we stuck with virtual. It just is quite a bit handier for those that don't have to come to campus, and we are going to look to do some in-person meetings. I'm going to talk a little bit, then there's going to be some, I'll say, air quote presentations, and then we'll have obviously an opportunity for some questions. One of the things you may have noticed is that I had booked in your calendars a meeting for today, but also booked a meeting for December. Our vision that you may have noticed on some of the other communications is to try to move to a model where we're mapping out the year in advance. And in a perfect world, they'll probably have those decisions made, call it May, June. So come the next May, June, our hope is that we can map out when our coaching clinics or coaching meetings will be for the year so that you can get them in your calendars. We're going to look for your schedule requests, so the facility requests for the whole year. So that's a new thing we've done this year, which it's still a work in progress. It wasn't perfect this year, but we didn't expect it to be. But we will look to have, call it next May, to have your fall schedule, your winter schedule, and your spring schedule. We're going to do the same for our revenue generation within our facilities, where we're going to just, again, try to map out the full year. Many of us, as I'm sure some of you that haven't messaged or communicated to me, have found the term by term asking in November, deadline 2 weeks, send us your schedule for the next term, frustrating for planning, but also challenging on the timing that we're often asked for those things when some of us are in the middle of the season. So that is, again, why we have the December meeting request in your calendars, is because we're actually trying to put them and get them organized so that you can be prepared for it. Diana and Siri are here today from our advancement office. I just suggested that they go first because I don't think they need to stay in here, even though they're welcome to, but to everything else that we're going to talk about today. But they just wanted a couple minutes, so I suggested that we'll have them go right away. So Diana, Siri, over to you two.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. We just wanted to give a quick update on the Varsity Giving Challenge. So we are set to run again from September 12th to the 19th. So that's a Monday to a Monday. It'll be the same format as last year. So basically the team goals will be set to 15% of your contactable alumni base. And the competition is really focused on donors and not dollars raised. So we're working on finalizing our donor cash incentives right now. So as you can recall, we had 2 last year. We're hoping to get 3. So we will share all of those details out in an email in the coming weeks. But wanted you guys to start thinking about your upcoming newsletters, or how you want to start spreading the word to alumni, family, and friends who may want to support your programs. You can absolutely start to share the dates out now, and mass communication will be going out to all of athletics alumni the week prior to the challenge, and then during the week as well. And yeah, we just really want to encourage everyone to take advantage of the campaign week. It really helps. It provides like an urgency and is a really great platform for everyone to give back to your programs. We had great success last year. We raised over $36,000 across all of the teams and had 350 donors, and was able to bring in a lot of new donors to all of the teams as well. So really just wanted to share that with you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Siri or myself. And then we will have an email with all of the details that I just mentioned, but probably more details out in the next few weeks as well. That's it.
Any questions for Diana or Siri? Okay, great, thanks. I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the work that's been done with the Excellence Committee. And so if you remember, many of you were involved. We do have a few new coaches that this may be new to them, but where kind of in COVID, we wanted to try to take some actions in you, and we met and we surveyed and we tried to identify some important key points within our department that we wanted to focus on. We called them pillars. We had each of the four kind of core members of the Excellence Committee, that being myself and Laura and Hoffer and Kim. We each chaired a pillar, and then we had some subcommittees that many of you were involved in. So from there, we came out with, sorry, someone's knocking on my door. Sorry, apologize for that. I wasn't thinking of timing, pickup time and this at the exact same time. So we did we had the breakout meetings, we came back and then we set some goals and some plans moving ahead with the Excellence Committee. Things have continued to progress. I would say, COVID is kind of altered and adjusted things a little bit, but we have done some things, and we more just wanted to give you a quick update that some things have come out of that. So a quick overview on we had a history pillar where we have had some discussions on some work we're going to do with our team pitchers. There's some work that has already started on the historical side where we have some department support looking to identify all of our rosters from the history of our programs. We're going to be looking to get that presented online, if you will. So that is in the works, and what exactly it's going to look like at the end of the day, I can't answer that now, but there is work that's being done. And then we're working on some archives that are going to come out to collect pictures. You're going to hear more about that as we move along. From another pillar, we're just kind of like athlete experience, where we have Laura and her group are going to be working with, have a plan to work with some of our injured athletes. So one of the things that was identified is that some of our injured athletes, especially our season-ending injured athletes, are maybe struggling with where they fit in with what their role and their identity. So Laura's going to be working on, I guess, a program, if you will, to work with some of our injured athletes that has come out of the ideas that we have within our Excellence Committee. There was going to be some work with attendance at our different games and competitions. And obviously with COVID, that was kind of slowed down a bit. So we'll get that back up and going. From our PD side, we did the coaching seminars last year. We are planning to build PD into these meetings. So one of the reasons why we want to map out our meetings for the year, it will also allow us to plan so it's not just administrative work. So our hope is do some admin, cover some things that we need to cover, but then also have a speaker or a presenter or a topic that we talk about. We're going to do a little bit of that today within our group. And we're also talking about considering a summit in May. So more of when we're all in that off-season time. From a sport performance, the Warrior Zone is getting some equipment added to it to allow some more, let's say, functionality, some use during the season. So that'll be new for us this year. The S&C program continues to grow, the student S&C program. So similar to our therapy program, where we have student therapists with most of our teams, Hoffer is working on the student S&C program under his guidance. So that's going to continue to grow. There's been a bridge in the alignment with therapy and S&C, not that there wasn't before, but there's a conscious effort to make sure that those two bodies are talking because they're so interlaced, if you will. So that's therapy and S&C. And then team builder is something that came out of it for a number of our teams that was part of our Excellence Committee discussions. I'd say one of the big things that came out of it, and when I'm done talking, the other members can feel free to jump in, but one of the big things that came out was our student manager program. So many of you have probably heard from Marshall at this point. So Rolly and I met with two of the directors of you, if you will, with the sport business program in our recreation and leisure faculty. We talked about building a student manager program where we would have some from students that have interest in sport, probably not on a varsity team due to their schedule, but are interested in the admin side of it. And so they they put out to the feeler to some of their students to see if they're interested in doing the student manager program. We built up a job description and sent it out, et cetera. Marshall's been fielding those responses. And Marsh, I don't know, maybe you take we weren't planning this, but why don't you take, 45 seconds or less and give us an overview because you know the details better.
Sure. So we started off with about 20 people applying for it. We didn't not hire anybody. We personally left the job descriptions very vague. We asked more on what sports they might be interested in working with, because each of you will have a different need, a different time commitment, a different role you might want somebody to take care of. And the idea is I brought on one of the students, Noah Mayberry, to be the coordinator, and he'll be working closely with the program. And as we go through the first year with the team managers, we're hoping that the job descriptions get created this year as it goes along, so to speak, so that we get a better idea of what you're looking for that role. So there will be some hiccups this year, absolutely. We fully expect that. I've let everybody know that there will be. However, we want this to be a learning experience so that we can grow and develop this program so that next year when we're hiring people for that role, we know what they're needed for in your particular sport. I have sent pretty much everybody a contact of the student manager that is interested in working with your team. Noah's doing a report up this week for me to make sure that we're all on pace and what's going on there. They have taken training through Lauren on how to do athlete registration. So if you have somebody I think the last one's tonight, isn't it, Lauren? Yeah, last one's tonight. So if you have a student athlete, or more likely Johnny's mom trying to fill out the forms and has a problem and sends an email to you, you can now send it to the student manager who will be able to help them through the process. They'll be doing another training seminar in August with Dan in regards to social media. So Dan will be training them up in our social media processes so we can get further exposure to your sport and the social media in more informal settings as well as formal game settings. Third, they will be doing a course this weekend through NCCP on team management and team managing programs. So it's about a 7-hour program they're in on Saturday, learning the ins and outs of being a team manager. And finally, they're all in the midst of finishing up their Say Sport work as well. So if anybody has any questions or concerns or hasn't heard from the manager, please email me directly and I'll track down what's going on. I know squash, I'm sorry that Aaron bowed out so late in the thing here, but we are working on getting somebody new for squash, as well as a couple of other sports that we haven't been able to fill yet. That pretty encapsulates everything there, Brian?
That's great, Marsh. Thanks. So our hope is that our plan is not just giving you a student and saying you figure out how you use them as a manager. The goal is that we have students assigned to your programs that we need to do some things, whether it's some social media, whether it's collecting some information for Trevor, whether it's helping with registration, where they have some tasks from us to support your programs, but also if you can use them to assist you in what you're doing, fantastic. But we're hoping that we have enough that we can also keep them busy from our end, with an ultimate goal of reducing the volume of administrative work that we put on you as coaches, because we fully understand that it's a massive amount of admin work that you have to do to run your program. So that's the big vision. Like Marshall has said, like I've said, understand it is the first year of it. It will be some growth. But your engagement involvement would be helpful, and then we can continue to grow to a level we think our student therapy program is, which is pretty solid. We'll get right in here now because I don't want us to go just too long. So any questions on anything so far? And then we'll get into some presentations and we'll open it back up for some questions. So any questions right now on anything that we've talked about? Okay, Hoffer, how are we making sure you don't go over time? What was our plan there? Am I just muting you, or is it a hook, or what was our plan here?
I'll talk fast. There was no plan.
Okay, so do you want to share, Hoffer, you run it, or do you want me to?
I'll run it.
Okay, so
That's all right. I think you might have to give me
I think I did. So I think
yeah, you
should-
did. But you're good. Okay, hey everyone. I'll be as efficient as I can with this. I thought this was just a good time to kind of have everyone in the same room with obviously some missing. Get everyone up to speed on levels of service for all of our programs and what to expect. And then also kind of go through some best practices for high performance that we would like you all to think about. We're not asking you all to reiterate and enforce these things, but if we're all speaking the same language, at least we can have resources in multiple locations to at least talk on this stuff. So first off, I'm just going to review the service provision structuring for this upcoming year. Next, a massive welcome to Coach Andrew Graham. So Andrew Graham is a strength conditioning coach that had been working with football, kind of formally, informally, but now he's going to be coming on in a full-time role. So his role is going to be predominantly to look after football and their 115 athletes, as well as he's going to be on the football staff, I believe. And then come the winter time, he's going to assist and help out a little bit more with some of our field sports, speed, agility, and conditioning work that we would run with our field hockey, rugby, and soccer programs. I want to provide an update on BioSteel and our system of ordering. And then my version of the presentation is going to be some best practices for human physical performance. So real quick, this is no surprise to the teams that I have been traditionally working with, as well as football. So those teams, so football, hockey, volleyball, basketball, and swimming, there's going to be no change. You're going to be receiving all the services, the direction, programming, testing, everything you're accustomed to, no change there. Not going to spend too much more time. This is really for what would be defined by the OUA as G2 and G3 sports. So our G2, Tier 2, you will all be receiving team-specific programming and availability for individual modifications based on specific demands of the athlete or needs of the athlete. Our intent is to give you all off-season coaching support. Obviously, that's going to be subject to availability and what we have in terms of facilities. You're going to have access to Team Builder software and testing services throughout the year. Very similar to our Tier 1 teams, our goal will be to test all of your athletes at least 3 times a year. Going down to our Tier 3 teams, we're going to be providing you all with a general strength conditioning program, both an in and off season program that is not sport specific. And I'm saying that because it does take a considerable amount of time and energy to write individual sport specific programs. And I just myself, I just don't feel like so I have the capacity to do that at the level I would deem proper. But we are going to provide some direction. That is a very well-rounded, best practice-based strength conditioning program. If you do have a program that you're following, absolutely do that. All I ask is that you kind of loop us in so that we can say, hey, this looks good, or if it's something that's totally out of left field, we might have some concerns and some feedback with that. We're not going to be able to provide testing, data collection, but I'm happy to provide some advice and best practices in terms of how to do proper testing. We are going to deliver programming via PDF. In terms of coaching support, again, right now, and maybe Brian will speak to this, this has been evolving over the last 6 years, and we've grown and grown and grown. We'd love to be able to provide more and more coaching, but as of right now, just in terms of space and human resource allocation, we don't have enough to be able to properly service all teams. However, in our lesser busy times of the year, If there's availability, I'm absolutely going to toss the invite out for other athletes to come in and get some guidance. Following up on Brian's conversation with the senior student coach leadership positions. So our student coach program is going to have really 3 levels. Levels 1 and 2 would be more the individual practitioner, where they would be in the gym, working on becoming a very good coach from a technical standpoint, assisting me, assisting Coach Graham in the facilitation of the actual strength conditioning programs. This role would be more being part of the team and getting the experience of what it means to be a strength conditioning coach with a team. For example, running warm-ups, facilitating proper regeneration protocols, assisting coaching staffs with planning meals, catering while on the road, making smoothies and shakes after games. To be honest, we don't have near even close to enough student coaches to make this run across all of our programs or even a couple of our programs, but it is something that I'm working on, and I'm really going to lean on our coaching staffs here in the department to help really kind of create this opportunity for students, because it is a very important one as students progress in the field of strength and conditioning. And like Brian said, Warrior Zone is going to have some more equipment available, heavier kettlebells, landmine attachments. There will be certain times of the week. We haven't ironed out exactly what nights they're going to be, that I will have a senior strength coach up there to help facilitate some in-season kind of competition time training protocols. Moving on to BioSteel. So for those that don't know, we have a phenomenal relationship with BioSteel. So BioSteel is a company that is founded here in Canada. The reason why we've selected them, and obviously BioSteel is becoming massive, especially over the last few years, but their products are NSF and Informed Choice tested, which means these are third-party organizations that validate what is in the product is actually what is in the product. So, for us as a department, there's a higher degree of trust that these products are safe, effective, and are free of any banned substance. So that's why we've gone to them, and obviously a lot of professional organizations go with them as well. They have a wide range of supplements that are available to, and I say, complement quality daily behaviors. These are supplements. These are not replacements for good nutrition and good sleep, which we'll talk on today. And finally, we have a very, very strong relationship with BioSteel. So we are getting gifts in kind, ranging from shaker cups to towels and things like that. And we do have a cash kickback program, which comes directly back to our varsity programs. The other good part is that we're getting approximately 40% off retail cost when purchasing as a team, which is a unbelievable savings over obviously what they would have to purchase at the store. And we can purchase anything from high performance sport drinks, protein, recovery protein, greens, and there's more product available for us as well. How do we want to execute this? So what I would like to see moving forward is all teams that want to purchase for your team, please send the email to me, and I will work with Lauren to make sure it's processed through our athletics account. Really, this is kind of one thing I want to see this relationship grow. There's a lot of good kickback, I guess, for us as a department. So I just want to keep my finger on the pulse a little bit more with how we're doing departmentally. Team orders can come directly through me, and I'll process it through Lauren. I do have an order form that is updated from past years that I'll send. Well, I guess I'll just send to everybody after the presentation, so you have it. You can send it to me. Most likely, it'll get delivered to the CIF building, and then we can kind of distribute from there. I am going to be putting out calls to all individual athletes if they would like to individually purchase BioSteel. We can essentially, they have a coupon code, I believe it's Warriors 25, where they get 25% off. If we purchase kind of as a team, if you will, they get a little bit of a higher percentage off as well. So I'll put those orders in the second Friday of each month. And I've already actually put a call out to all of our athletes through TeamBuilder if they want to order it. But I will kind of distribute through a master list or through our athlete newsletter moving forward. Okay. Again, my version of the presentation before I get cut off, because I'm probably already going over time. So I think just talking about the best practices for sustained high performance. These are the things that the athlete is doing outside of sport, outside of strength conditioning, that is allowing them to balance the stress and recovery response appropriately. Really, our goal is to athletes, expand an athlete's ability to express sports skill at higher levels of play. We want athletes to remain in sport in a way that allow them to continually build confidence and ultimately performance in sport. And even at a higher level, our goal is really to enhance their athletic leadership and professional experience through sport, and keeping them in sport and allowing them to develop strategies that optimize their performance, I think are very important attributes, whether we're talking about athletes leadership or athletics leadership or just professional life. In terms of the 3 pillars I want to go, and this is where I'm happy to be a resource as much as I can for all of our teams, whether it's a follow-up conversation or not. But I think if we're all speaking the same language, this will serve us all well. So first pillar, preparation. Second is going to be regeneration. And then the final one is just appropriate selection of load. And I'm not talking about weight on a squat rack. I'm talking about how much load are we exposing our athletes to in terms of just physical stress throughout the week or in a given training session. Preparation, I'm going to break down into really 2 parts. One, physical. Second is going to be more internal physiological or nutritional. So first, physical preparation. I want us all to ask, are our athletes physically prepared to handle the demands of sport? That's where selecting appropriate fitness tests can come into play to really, number one, understand, do our athletes in a non-reactive, non-competitive state generally have the capacity to play at the level that we need them to play at for the duration that we need them to play at. Happy to be a resource here. A lot of the teams that, the tier 1, tier 2 teams, sometimes I facilitate testing, sometimes the team facilitates testing, but I think if we have some mechanism of collecting data, collecting it in a very reliable manner, and then furthermore, collecting it longitudinally, we can A, have better conversations with our athletes, B, be able to make more informed decisions in terms of practice and competition load, C, look at S&C interventions if needed, and then more importantly, have more impactful conversations with our athletes over the course of their time here at Waterloo to make sure that their efforts are actually yielding higher levels of performance. Next is just warming up properly. I really don't like the use of warm-ups, so I'm going to call it acute physical preparation protocols. Ideally, what we want to see, and it's not lost on me that our athletes are busy. You as coaches are busy. Our therapists are busy taping and stuff like that. But ideally, I would like to see either athletes allocate or our teams allocate 15 to 20 minutes of this sort of protocol leading into practice. When we teach this in kinesiology, we follow what's called the RAMP protocol: raise, activate, mobilize, and finally prime or potentiate. This really is taking an athlete from kind of a static, non-competitive, non-training status and getting them primed and prepared to execute what you're going to be asking for them in practice. Ideally, we want this to be very general to specific. So if I kind of go back, raise is going to be raise internal body temperature. Activate is going to be activating certain movement patterns and muscle groups that are going to be needed in sport. Mobilize is going to be, exposing our bodies to degrees of motion that are going to be needed in sport. And then finally, prime and potentiate is exposing our athletes to specific velocities and levels of activation that are required in sport or training. Happy to be a resource. Obviously, teams have their own styles of warm-up, how they want to get things done, different environments. But I'm going to ask everyone here is at least to think on, is our team really optimizing this time period before practice? And is there areas that we can improve? Internal physiology. This isn't going to be a whole nutrition talk, but I think if we're all speaking the same language, that's a good thing. We want our food to be consumed from predominantly whole foods throughout the day that meet nutrient intake requirements, caloric requirements. A lot of our programs, we're not doing body fat testing, or we do measure body weight, but we're not doing that but essentially, as long as we're speaking the same language, I think it's important. We want energy to come from whole foods that are as often as possible not processed. We want to be limiting consumption of food and drink that would deplete energy or disrupt hormonal balance, i.e. consuming too much sugary food, consuming too much alcohol, consuming excessive quantities of caffeine, are all going to create some disturbance internally that is going to kind of throw off our energy homeostasis. We want to make sure we're hydrating throughout the day. Our students are in class. Sometimes they forget, they're studying. So we want to make sure that we're kind of always reinforcing the importance of hydration and rehydration prior to and during gameplay. This last point is obviously challenging, especially before training times, but ideally we want our last meal to be consumed 3.5 to 4 hours prior to competition or very intense gameplay. Happy to expand on any of these points with your teams individually. But again, I think today the goal is to get everyone on the same page in terms of what preparation means. Regeneration. So now we're talking about recovery. So first, just acute regenerations. What can we do immediately post? First thing is get nutrients back into. Ideally, a high glycemic food source in conjunction with a readily available protein source. So this could be in the form of a whole food smoothie that an athlete has made at home. Ideally, that's what I'm going to lean towards before we go to the supplement route. If obviously our athletes are busy and we need to go to the supplement route, that is totally okay. Again, we want to make sure that if we are choosing a supplement, it is an NSF or informed choice product. Next, we want to rehydrate with fluids and electrolytes lost. Common recommendation is if we lost a pound of weight, we got to replenish with a pound of water. Obviously, this isn't something that you as coaches are going to be overseeing, but I think it's important that we just all are understanding kind of that process. Next, we want to suppress our kind of fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system, and upregulate kind of our parasympathetic. So this is kind of getting us back into a state of recovery. So find mechanisms to cool internal temperature. I am not talking about dropping ourselves into an ice bath, but we can do things to cool our hands, cool our feet, and find ways to just cool our internal temperature. Expose ourselves to some diaphragmatic breathing. So deep diaphragmatic breathing that's going to, it's called stimulate vagal tone, and hopefully kind of reduce heart rate and things like that. And then finally, this would be a time to expose ourselves to some static stretching and returning our bodies to a normal anatomical state. Ongoing and delayed regeneration. Our biggest weapon as athletes and as teams is sleep. And again, it's not lost on me the stress and challenges that our worlds kind of impose on us. But sleep is our number one way to improve recovery and regeneration. Second is obviously nutrition, making sure that throughout the day, 3 to 5 meals a day from a whole food source, looking at opportunities for other therapeutic interventions. Obviously, like our therapy staff is fantastic, and using them and their knowledge base is massive. And then also looking, is there some other ways we can improve regeneration, whether it's massage therapy or whatnot. And then finally, what I'm calling is +1 game day protocols. A recovery day doesn't mean sitting and doing nothing. Recovery ideally is still being active, facilitating blood flow, facilitating movement, but in a way that's not going to compound stress or fatigue. So that could be as simple as going out for a 25-minute walk, getting sun exposure in the morning. It could be just a general movement protocol. It could be something in the pool. There's lots of ways we can do that, but I just want everyone to be kind of thinking about how can we recover in a way that isn't just doing nothing. And then finally, appropriate load selection. Obviously, all of our tissue has a certain amount of tolerance. And the big thing that we want to understand is our load that we're giving them through practice, through training, exceeding their body's ability, and trying to make decisions with that. And then secondly, making sure that we're, if we are exposing them to a certain amount of stress, we're facilitating and allowing for sufficient recovery time. So all I'm asking us all to think about after this is, does the loads of practice, does the load of the week, of the month, match the meet our athletes where they are? B, is it designed in a way that's facilitating growth through appropriate recovery? And then looking over the course of our year to say, are we looking to periodize our practice plans in a way that is working towards optimal performance at key or peak competition times? So this is going to be something that we'll expand on in future development workshops with YTP planning and whatnot. But I wanted to just get us thinking about this today. That's all I got.
Thanks, Hoffer. So yeah, that's great. So I'm sure some of you probably have some experiences and knowledge where you just followed it fully along, and for some of you that may be some new terminology for you, but to know that that's kind of Hoffer's day and how he works with our athletes and is going to look to work with all of you and your athletes is awesome. So appreciate that, Hoffer, and we'll send it out. Like, we'll make that the presentations a PDF and get it out to you when we send out the link to the video. Kim is going to go next. So again, why Andrew and Kim and Laura are talking today is we just thought, can we make our meetings more than just admin? Admin stuff is important, obviously, but then let's do some of these other parts where there's a little bit of PD, if you will, built in, and we'll do some bigger kind of external PD on some other times. But we thought, let's take advantage of some of our the elite presenters, if you will, that are on our panel right now. So I am going to control Kim's. Kim, bear with me. You can talk if you want while you give me a second to get your slides up.
Sure. Did Madeline have a question? I thought I saw a hand up. Is she?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
For Andrew, and that would be, would it be possible to have you come and talk to our athletes and give them that whole spiel? Because as much as I think myself and our coaches kind of get that, I'm from the rowing team, sorry. And so as we're new, we're just trying to make sure we instill that knowledge starting off strongly to avoid any problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, welcome to your entire team, to our varsity. I know it's been a process to get here, so welcome to you guys. Yeah, so I think obviously we have, what do we have, 53 varsity teams now, Borky? Kidding.
Close.
So there's a lot. Yeah, so I think what we're gonna do is I'm gonna chat with both, well, I guess all three of Lauren, Chris, and Brian. And first off, our first year welcoming thing that we have going, I'd like to speak at that. And I think what I'm probably going to do, instead of having 34 hour-and-a-half talks, I'm probably going to film one big one and send it out to everybody.
Okay.
That expands on all we talked about and more. That athletes can kind of refer back to whenever they want.
And I don't know if you know this, but do you know the timeline you think that would be done by? Just for planning purposes, we are having a training camp at like the first weekend of September. So I don't know if it'll be done by then, or if not, then we'll make sure to set aside time to go over it as a team later.
I'll make sure it's done before then.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Anyone else with questions before pass it over to Kim? Okay, great. Over to you, Kim, and you just
Awesome.
talk
Just
to-
go, I'll give you the peace sign when to change it. So we'll start with we'll go right with the first slide. I'm outsourcing to Brian. It's that time in the summer where I guess I could have shared my screen, but I thought I'd outsource to the man. Okay, yeah. So if you just want to go with the first one, just start it. That'd be great.
Can you see it?
You've got the whole thing up right now. So if you go down to slideshow,
Where am I at here?
go over to slideshow
At the bottom?
at the top.
Isn't there usually a little button I can push to make this all? Oh, there we go.
If you just do slideshow, play from start, right there. There you go. And then you can just hit the arrow when I'm done. So yeah, if you want to just go back to the first slide, there we go, perfect. Okay, so my name's Kim Dawson. Your names look familiar to many of me or to myself, and certainly your faces do as well. So thanks for inviting me to have a conversation here today. I thought I would keep it very, very informal. I know this is something that we all of you could actually contribute to. And I just thought I'd look at some of the things. I always like to look for trends that I notice that are going on in my conversations with teams or with other groups that I'm working with or other athletes that I'm working with. And again, if there's anything you'd like to add to, please do. I don't want to make this so lectury, but I just thought, here's just some things that we can think about at this juncture as we start to do all our preparation and our planning for this upcoming year. Okay, thanks, Brian. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of hit 5 different things that I think, global types of issues that we can really think about. So one of the individuals that was the first generation in the area of sports psychology was Ken Ravizza, and he's the one that's talking to the coach from the Chicago Cubs. And a long time ago, when I was an undergrad and I was interested in this area, and we were at a conference, I asked him, I said, what would be one of the things that you would say to someone that would be interested in this area? And what he said to me is, before an athlete cares about what you know, they have to know that you care. And since that time, I thought he was brilliant. I thought, this is the most novel thing I've ever heard. But I now start to suspect that I don't think he was the original person of that quotation. But I still like to remember that moment because it really hit home to me in terms of, if we're going to work with athletes or individuals, they're individuals first, we have to let them know that we care and that they are worth investing in. And then sometimes I think about, well, what is it that we have to care about? Well, first of all, we have to care about them as individuals in terms of helping them maneuver their athletic environment and get the most out of this experience. Then it's a little bit more than that too. We should also care about other things. We do need to care about winning. We do need to care about culture. We do need to care about making sure that we develop the best teams that we can. So caring can be something in terms of projecting it onto the athlete itself. And it also can be something about making sure that our whole team cares about the same things. So I've certainly worked with some teams where some individuals will care about one thing, and perhaps that's being selected for a higher level team. And that's going to break up the team. So it's important to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, if we just go with the analogy, and making sure that we're caring about the same things. Okay, so making sure that your athletes understand that you're invested in them and you're invested in the process. Thanks, Brian. And in the media right now, you're hearing an awful lot about culture. You're hearing an awful lot about environments, specifically with respect to hockey in terms of gymnastics. It's 10, I believe, national sport organizations right now are having reviews of their culture and their environment. So one of the things we're starting to talk about is psychological safety for our athletes and making sure that our environments and our climates are a safe place for these individuals. So it can mean lots of different things. To me, what it means is it's a space where your athletes can come to your rinks, to your gym, to your water, to your pool, to your fields, and they feel that they are heard and seen. Right? It also means that they are seen as individuals. And because we work with groups, there are certain individuals that can get lost in that shuffle and in that group, and they might not necessarily grow or feel that they are able to develop at a rate that's commensurate with their skill level. So all athletes should be treated equally, but differently, and figuring out what does each one of your athlete need and how do they communicate? What's the best way to communicate with these individuals? So it really is an environment where these athletes feel like they're part of the process. It's not necessarily them that's making the decisions, but they have an active voice in terms of what's happening. So psychological safety is all about individuals feeling that they can take some risks and there won't be punishment for those risks, and feeling that they can actually make some errors. And again, there won't be any sort of repercussions in a negative way because of those errors. Okay, so they're having them ask for what they need and having a very receptive type of environment for that. Okay, thanks, Brian. And the third point is that to have a very functional and cohesive team, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's important to put some time to invest into making sure that we have a team that we want to make sure it's as cohesive as it possibly can be. So cohesion just simply means all the forces that are pulling this team together. So when your group of individuals come together, there's lots of different forces that can pull them away. We want to make sure that we're facilitating and maximizing all of the different reasons for them to stay on this team, be part of this team, and invest in this team. So what does that mean? And well, first of all, one of the reasons I put the Raptors up is because Nick Nurse is a coach that does this extremely well. Right. And certainly when we looked at the the NBA champions, and even that year, they had a very cohesive and team in terms of the personalities that they had. They had some really big personalities, but he would talk repeatedly about making sure that every athlete knew what their role and their responsibility is. And he had a lot that had come in just for that year. So he's someone that really understood that it took time, and he wasn't afraid necessarily to maybe cut into practice time a little bit to have conversations to build this type of cohesion. So what does it take then? Well, it takes deliberate leadership structures. When I meet with your team, sometimes I like to guess at who the leadership structure is based on their interaction with me. So it's really important to make sure that we pick our formal leaders and we know what our leadership structure is going to be. Because a good leadership structure can make a team better, and a poor leadership structure can really debilitate it. Thinking about effective communication, what does that look like for your team? How do you communicate with them effectively in the best way? You know, we've got so many modes of communication these days. Are you a verbal coach? Do you use the whiteboard? Do you reinforce with follow-up notes afterwards in terms of sending little messages in terms of what we talked about? And that's really one of the nice things that you can do when you're trying to build cohesion, is that after practice, take a few minutes and ask an individual, what did we learn here today? What did we do here today? What is it that we as a team worked on, and how did we develop and grow in a certain way? One of the things that I'm also talking to athletes about is harmonious conflict, in the sense that not everyone's going to agree at all times, but we have to expect that. So how do we communicate in a way that is effective, that solves the problem and gets us to where we need to be? And overall, just having a environment of respect where, again, we can have difference of opinions, we have diversity, and we can make sure that we're working together to respect each other and their opinions. So the big point here is that ask yourself, what are the things that you're doing to build a cohesive team? How are you communicating to them in terms of what your expectations are? Very simple things to do is to use inclusive language. Things like us, the crew, our team. Those are words that make sure that we feel like we're in this together. Okay, so different ways to build these types of teams. And I'll be working with some of your teams actually to build this as well. Okay, thanks, Brian. And then, you know, this sort of leads right into the next one, is that sometimes people think that competitive environments and growth environments are mutually exclusive or very different things. They are not. They look exactly the same. Okay, so a growth environment then is an opportunity for kids to problem solve, be creative, get some feedback about the things that they need. So this really does go back, not to the psychological side, but also the motor learning side, in terms of how do we have kids actually learn? And it's going to be another really interesting year, because you're going to get athletes all across the spectrum in terms of, you know, differences in terms of, and variability in terms of what their skill set's going to be based on the experiences that they had last year again. Okay, so one of the things that we really have to think about is we have to provide feedback. If we don't provide feedback in our environment, there's no opportunity for growth. Okay, no opportunity for growth means that our performance doesn't get better, means that we're not really putting on our best competitive team. Okay, so sometimes I hear people say criticism. I want to remove that word from the vocabulary. It's simply an assessment, an evaluation of how people are doing. It will be an evaluation of things that have to change, right? So that is just feedback that's necessary. Because if we look at the whole continuum of motor learning to motor performance, again, you're going to have kids everywhere on that continuum. So our job then is to try to push them up that continuum as quickly as we can for the facilitation of the team. Okay, so when an athlete is learning a new skill, it's about the expectation that they're probably going to do it more times incorrectly than correctly. Right? That's going to be some of our first year athletes. That's okay for them to come in at this point. How can I make sure that I use my feedback, my instruction, my modeling to make sure that they know what they need to do? Okay. And then conversely, when we get up to that performance stage, those athletes that can, and they have the repertoire and they have the skill set and they have the motor programs to actually facilitate these things, then it becomes a little bit more of a motivational challenge for those types of athletes. And what do I do to make sure that I facilitate them to be able to do that skill set? Okay, so just understanding that as we move these athletes up this chain, they have different types of things. Lower on the motor learning things means that you need a lot of verbal evaluation and feedback. Higher up that chain, we need a lot more motivation and emotional type of feedback for those types of athletes. Okay, one of the things that's coming up over and over again right now too is this whole aspect of resilience. And it was, I hear it from coaches sometimes saying, I just don't think my athletes are resilient. And, this athlete is resilient, this athlete isn't resilient. So last week, I was actually an external examiner on a thesis from a graduate student, Henley Lapide, that was looking at resilience of varsity athletes during COVID. And it was a really interesting thesis because a lot of different things came out. Some athletes use sport as a way to cope, as you would imagine, with the other aspects that were going on. Other athletes struggled with trying to find some normalcy through their sport and what that meant. And the general takeaway that the student was trying to talk about was the fact that resilience is very complex, that the definition has involved with behaviors, what people do, how they think and how they feel. And at the end of the day, I asked her if really, is it complex or is it actually quite simple? Is it basically what athletes do? Does that demonstrate resilience? And I'll give you an example. So here is a picture of Mandy Bujold, who I've worked with for just a number of years. And this was leading up to the 2020 Olympics that moved to the 2021 Olympics. And having conversations with her some days where she would say, I just don't feel like I'm doing the right thing. I just feel demotivated. I don't think I'm on track. And I would ask her, well, did you go to the gym? Yes, I went to the gym. Did you do your sparring? Yes, I did my sparring. Did you make sure that you had your good nutrition today? Yes, I did. Did you make sure that you wrote in your journal? Absolutely. Right. And then I realized, like, isn't that resilience? Like, isn't that exactly what we're looking for these athletes? Is that asking them when a number of different factors, again, are pulling them away from training, they come to training, they do what they're supposed to do. That is resilience. So maybe we should be looking at it a little bit differently and really rewarding our athletes for the things that they're doing versus perhaps seeing the things that they're not doing and simplifying it a little bit. Okay, because we've all been in that situation where we haven't felt like doing certain things, but we show up that day. And that is definitely demonstrating some resilience. And then at the end of the day, just remember that individuals have 3 general basic needs. And if we can fulfill those, then we have a really good individual that's motivated to be in our space. Okay, so the first thing is they want to be challenged, right? They want to make sure that they have some opportunity to demonstrate their competency. Okay, so challenge them in a way that they can be challenged. And again, even though we have a team, we have to acknowledge the individuals within that team. They will be challenged differentially. So giving that challenge so that they can show their competence to us. Okay? They also have a need for autonomy, particularly the age group that you are coaching. Those individuals are very much going through a stage where they're feeling like, I'm trying to find my way in this world. And that doesn't leave when they come into your gym or they step on your ice or they go in your pool or wherever you are on a field. They are still taking that same type of developmental attitude about exploration and trying to figure out who they are. Okay, and trying to get some more responsibility in their world. So remembering that. And then finally, we still want this relatedness, is that we don't live on an island. So these individuals want to feel like they're part of something. So very much, again, making them feel like this is a team. It is us. It is within this group. How do we make them feel related and part so they don't feel isolated? And truly, that's what the research is showing us in terms of what COVID has done for us, is that we have really gone down the chain in terms of feeling connected, and isolation is up, connection is low. So don't think that COVID hasn't changed the mentality of the athletes that you're working with. Very much so. It's changed them physically, it's changed them emotionally, and it's changed them psychologically. And it's going to take a long time before we actually figure out the ramifications of that. So just figuring out then, what can we do to make sure that we have them feel connected and we have them feel related? So a lot of these things are intertwined then in terms of making sure our environment set that up. Okay, thanks, Brian. And then just the last thing, this is just something that, having worked with your athletes at UW for a while and worked with university athletes comparative to other athletes that don't have the academic schedule, there are some things that make this group of individuals unique. And even we can't classify full year athletics with one-term athletics, because that's got a whole different set of challenges too. So understanding where that fits in with the academic schedule, right? So the first thing I always say is that athletes are not generally overtrained, they're under-recovered. So this does fit into what Andrew's talking about, is your periodization plan, and understanding that there's going to be times that perhaps the academic and the athletic schedule might actually conflict. And one of those times that I find is actually in November. Right? And November for a full year sport, because that's when sport starts to pick up. You start to have your first games in October, yet the academic schedule is starting to peak this way too. So you're coming in with lots and lots of energy and expectation about hitting the ground running, and they're already starting to feel November, right? And November truly is a tough time for most athletes and most individuals. The light is changing, their sleep patterns are changing, workload is going up, and their resources are going low. So just understanding that sometimes not everything can be gained by a day of training. Sometimes we need a day off, and sometimes it might not even be a planned day off, right? Or some sort of something different that day in terms of what it is. Okay? The other thing that I realize about your athletes is that some of them actually harbor on the scale of being maladaptive perfectionism. So if we think of perfectionism as a personality trait, and it's almost like an inverted U. If we go up the top side of it, it's really good because it helps with self-regulation, it helps with self-governance, it allows us to do time management and all of those different things that are really great things that we love about our athletes, right? They come to the gym on time, they're dependable, they're consistent, we get it, okay? But then some of them tip over to this other side, which is their expectations for themselves, for the team, and for others can actually be maladaptive because those expectations are unrealistic, right? And particularly in some of the different academic programs that you have, these athletes have come in with very high grades. They know how to do things, they know how to perform, but they don't necessarily know how to learn because things have been very easy for them academically and sometimes athletically as well. So understanding that about your athletes, and sometimes I have a good chuckle with them because even last year I had a conversation where I said, did you really expect to win this game? It was a basketball player I was talking to without the other team getting a point. And she looked at me and laughed and she said, no. And I thought, you know what? The funny part is she kind of thought that we should. And I see it with some of the other teams as well, is that when you get behind a little bit, the expectation is that we could really win this game without this other team getting a point against us or scoring against us. So even though you and I know that that's unrealistic, in some of these brains, they see those sorts of things as a negative thing. And even having conversations with some of the athletes, a comment that can be completely neutral and can be about feedback can be perceived as something quite negative because they haven't received a lot of feedback. They don't know how to integrate a lot of feedback. And again, because of their expectations about what they want for themselves. So just being really mindful of that in terms of who some of your athletes are. And particularly if you've got some coming from very high academic programs in the sense of what they need to do to fulfill themselves over there as well. Okay, so it's about giving these athletes permission to actually grow and giving themselves permission to actually have some errors and making sure that they're understanding that just because we get down, we got to have a little bit of grit. We've got to be able to learn. We've got to be able to move in and we've got to keep going. It's not always going to be easy, but it's going to be okay. And again, that might just seem a little bit obvious, but those are some of the conversations that I have quite a bit with the athletes in terms of making sure I'm bringing them back. And some of the times I ask them, are you falling down the rabbit hole? And they will tell me honestly, yes, I feel like I am. I feel like I'm overwhelmed by all the things I need to do in the sport, in school, all of these other things. They're high performing individuals, not just in athletics, but across the board. So just being realistic about that then. Okay, so I think that's everything I've got to say. And again, I don't mean to be lecture. I don't mean to tell you, these are just some observations that I've made in the last few, little bit working with your teams and also having some opportunities to work with some other groups as well. So if anyone has any questions at all, I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions or any comments or anything they'd like to add as well. All good?
Awesome, Kim, thanks. So just, we're trying to be clear and transparent in everything that's happening. So Kim is a full-time professor. We've slowly chipped and clawed and taken as much of her as we can and want to take more. So similar to Hoffer, like 5 years ago, our S&C program wasn't where it is today, and hopefully 10 years or 5 years from now, it's beyond what we are right now. And similar with Kim, we'd like to get more of her or people like her to build in our support for all of our athletes. It's a massive undertaking with 34 teams, close to 700 athletes. So just know that we have identified it's really good information, and our goal is to continue to build. Awesome stuff, Kim. And last chance for questions for Kim. Okay, thanks. So we'll go to Laura. Laura, you can talk for a second if you want while you give me a second to pull up your material.
Sure, thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all, even though you're very small on my screen. And welcome to all of our new coaches. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you here. I'm going to use my time today to kind of go through an overview of what the therapy department is. Again, with a lot of new coaches, this will be new to you. Even some of our coaches that are returning coaches, but were new during COVID, this might also be kind of new to you, and it's a refresher for our older coaches. Again, if you have any questions at the end, just fire away. Brian, you can go probably to the next one. So just as an overview of what my team looks like, there's 4 of us ATs. Actually, there's 5. I didn't add one to the bottom there, but I was kind of cramped for space. We have divided up the teams somewhat evenly amongst the 4/5 of us. The one that I'm missing at the bottom is Jackie McCarl, who works with men's hockey. We've split up these teams in an attempt to kind of lighten the load among each of us and to give you guys all, equal service as best we can with the spaces that we're given. So you guys, obviously I'm Laura, you would know Lindsay, she's been around for 4 years. Emily was working in the PAC clinic in the winter semester, and then we've just hired her to replace Jacqueline on Jacqueline's mat leave. So Emily will be with us for this season. And then our other recent hire is Dave Wright, who will now be working in the PAC therapy clinic, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and is also doing football. So football has been taken off of my plate. It's now on his plate, and it is much more of an even process amongst the 4/5 of us. So we've been, like I said, designated to work with your team. So if you have any questions about your athletes, you can fire away to your appropriate person. You may have heard from your ATs already in terms of all the med forms and stuff that we've been tracking. Just so you know, that's how it's set up. We each have our own team that we're responsible for. And we kind of run things similar, but maybe a little different just based on our personalities and the coaches that we're working with. So again, if you have suggestions about how you would like things to go, shoot them our way and we can do our best to adapt. One thing I wanted to talk about is just who has access to therapy. In season, in your particular season, depending on the length of that season, all your athletes have therapy. It is a free service during their season. Out of season, so if you remember back onto Hoffer's slides, we have split our teams based on the OUA G levels. So our tier 1s, 2s, and 3s. So tier 1s are currently receiving year-long therapy. Tier 2s and 3s will receive therapy during their seasons. And then for, I think, a 2-week block out of season, right after your season is over, we'll try and get through some season ending or end of season injuries. And then beyond that, we switch to a paid model. So that's where Dave comes in at the PAC therapy clinic. Most of our therapy is done up here at CIF, but we have a secondary clinic down at PAC. And all of the students on campus actually have athletic therapy coverage. They're covered for up to they're covered 80% up to, I think, $400 per injury. And so that's the model that we've transitioned to over the last couple of years as a means of revenue generation and also as a means to get all the athletes the therapy that they require. That's not to say that we're going to kick someone out if their insurance has run out. If someone tears their ACL, we're not going to say, see you later, you're on your own after whatever 6 treatments. We're going to find a way to work with that. But that's the model that we're currently running with here in Therapyland. So for those of you who are new, if your sport falls into the tier 2, tier 3, just know that you will have therapy in season, and then that'll switch to paid service out of season. Just to kind of carry on with our team here. So we've been lucky enough to be associated with a couple of really great sports med doctors and surgeons the last couple of years. Dr. Bailey and Dr. McQuaig work at MSK. There's one location on Queen Street and one on Union, and they have just recently signed a lease into a new building where they're going to combine their 2 practices just up on King Street behind Farm Boy. So they will be much closer to campus, which is nice. I was talking to Dr. McQuaig the other day. Pre-COVID, he would come in once or twice a week to the CIF clinic where we could book in injured athletes to get an assessment with him, and then he could further send them on for MRIs, X-rays, or whatever is needed, as well as a referral to Dr. Bailey. Normally, to see a sports med doctor, you actually have to get a referral from your family doctor. We've been able to bypass that with Dr. McQuaig, and that's a service that we're going to continue, and it'll be much easier once they are up the street from us. John and I are kind of working on a model that will benefit the athletes. But in the meantime, he'll come in probably once a week until they move, where we will book the athletes in to see him. And then if they need to see ortho consult, so that's Dr. Bailey, Dr. Quigg will do that referral. But they're great doctors. They've been with us for a while now. And they are, I mean, they get it. They are both athletes. They understand the sports world. They understand that, things need to move a little bit faster than they would out there in the real world in terms of waiting for x-rays and MRIs. So they've been really helpful in trying to help us navigate that process. And again, that's a free service for the athletes. Dr. Wallace has joined us the last couple of years. She's another sports medicine physician as well as a GP. And she spends part of her days working across the street in health services. So if we can't get someone in to see Dr. McQuaig, Dr. Wallace is our next option. She is also currently doing physicals, and I'll talk about this on the next slide, but she has offered to do physicals for varsity athletes that need them at a bit of a discounted rate, which is nice. But again, that's an appointment thing that we can generally set up for the athletes. And then the big one that I wanted to talk about, Hoffer and Marshall both talked about their programs in terms of student manager and the student S&C team. The student trainers have been around. I'm coming into my 16th year, and the student trainers have been around longer than I have. This program has been running for quite some time, and we honestly couldn't do our jobs without having them around. They're kind of the eyes and ears for us, since we obviously can't be at all of our team's practices all the time. We have 60-ish student trainers this year. We actually put out an application process. They have to apply, they have to send us their resumes, they have to list any relevant experience they have. We interviewed, I think we had over 100 applicants, 40 of them were returning. We might have interviewed maybe 40 or 50. We've done it virtually the last few years with a couple of full-time coaches helping us out with that. And we hired, I think, we must have hired about 40. We have 60 total. So they've gone through the ringer a little bit. It's not just, picking names and assigning them to teams. They range in years from second year kin to fifth year kin. And with that comes a variety of knowledge. So Rob Burns, who had my job previously, now teaches full-time in kin, and he teaches a lot of courses that are applicable to student trainers, including one this year that's brand new, which actually gives our student trainers a quarter credit for their work as a trainer, which matches up with a first year quarter credit course that previously they all had to take in order to apply to be a student trainer, but the last 2 years because of COVID, it was canceled. So we kind of had to do a little workaround. So we're highly involved with the kin program. That's where I would say 99% of our student trainers come from. The odd time we'll have someone from another program in AHS. So they have some knowledge from kin, and then we do our best to teach them the skills that we want them to learn. So Lindsay has kind of taken on the student trainer. She does learning times fairly regularly, where we'll go through taping skills or how to massage a hamstring or just the stuff that we think is going to come up on a regular basis. They all, as a minimum requirement, have to have their standard first aid, and a lot of them have been working towards getting their first responder, which is just another level up. They're qualified to use oxygen. It's kind of a level between first aid and going towards the paramedic route. So we've got 4 or 5 of those this year. A few more will be getting it, and we try and put those with teams that are more high impact, that are going to require a first responder. And we've noticed the ones that have taken that course, it's completely changed their confidence level in terms of dealing with injuries when they might be at practice without us around. But one thing to note, they are not ATs. They have not gone to school like we have. They're not certified. We like them to use their common sense and the skills that we've kind of given them, but that doesn't replace us. So if an athlete does get injured, we don't want the student trainers to just diagnose at practice and start treating it right away. That's not their role. Their role is to use their skill set, try and assess the injury as best they can, treat it as safely as they can in terms of, should we wrap it? Should we ice it? Should this player sit out? What should we do? And then that player's got to get to see one of us. And then we, depending on the student trainers that we're dealing with, can then, kind of assign some exercises for that athlete to do at practice if they're injured, or a few techniques that we know that that student trainer is capable of performing. We can give them permission to do that at practice. But the student trainers aren't to be assessing and diagnosing and then to coming up with a treatment plan all on their own. That's not their role. Having said that, though, they are part of your team. They're around as much as your athletes are. I guess we would consider them on the coaching side of things, but they're the same age as your players. So they're in a bit of a tricky dynamic. They're classmates with a lot of your athletes. It makes it tricky for them to then have to tell somebody that they can't play because they're concussed. And so that's where we really push that they're part of the coaching staff. So having your backup when a student trainer comes to tell you that someone is injured, it really goes a long way to building their confidence. I think I had another point with that, but it'll come back to me. Can you go to the next one, Brett? You've probably all been bombarded lately with information about getting all of the student athlete registration done. It's been said multiple times, but just to reiterate, it's actual humans that are checking all of these things. So myself, Lauren, and Gilbert, as well as my other ATs, we're the ones that are looking at 750 athletes and the 7 buttons of things they have to do on the registration page. So again, Brian said this before, but if someone uploads something at midnight, they're not automatically going to get a check mark. It's got to be all of us looking through all of our categories to make sure that your athlete has done all the things they're supposed to do. And that gives them green check marks across the board, and then they'll get their membership. My specific world obviously is the medical questionnaire. We don't want those coming to your inboxes, so please don't tell your athletes to send you the med forms and you forward it on to us. We've set up a specific email address on Teams. I know it looks really, really weird if you click on it. If I could change it, it would, but Teams doesn't give me that option, but it's a secure email address. So I don't want med forms sitting around in anybody's inboxes. You guys shouldn't be seeing that information, and our inboxes aren't secure. So this Microsoft Teams email address that pops up when you click on the link looks bizarre, but it is correct. So please tell your athletes not to email us or you med forms, but just to send them to that one location. That way it's all in the same place. We have a system for tracking it. If it winds up in different inboxes, we're going to lose things. But there's a pile of questions on that questionnaire, 60 plus, I would say, a lot about their family history, about their own injury history. There's a pile of mental health questions and some current injury questions. So we read all of those things, and we'll reach out to those athletes if there are any questions that they've answered yes to that requires some follow-up. For example, on the mental health questionnaire, one of the questions is, do you think about things over and over again, or are you lacking in confidence? So we have established that we're going to reach out to those athletes with a link to Campus Wellness saying, did you know we have these services available to you? We're happy to help that athlete navigate the website. We're happy to refer on if needed. But we're sending out information to those athletes that may have clicked yes to any of those questions. And that's what I've got below there. If it's, a counseling appointment we need to set up, or is it just to go see a doctor if we have some questions about her previous injury. all first year athletes have to get a physical done by their family doctor. It's a 2-page part of the 4-page medical questionnaire. Instructions are all on the registration website. Everyone knows that that's a thing they have to do. And if they're struggling to actually get an appointment, I know some people don't have family doctors, have those people reach out to me, and then we can kind of navigate towards health services and see if Dr. Wallace can book an appointment. So that's the medical questionnaire that comes through first. Then on the day-to-day basis, so if an athlete sustains an injury, the student therapist will be at practices. Part of the contract that they sign, they're volunteers. First of all, they don't get paid to do this, but we do make them sign kind of an agreement. And part of that is knowing that they have a minimum requirement of time that they need to show up to practices and games. Part of that is if you only come to a practice on Monday, the athletes aren't going to know who you are and the coaches aren't going to trust you. So we've made a requirement for them to show up to new student trainers are 80% of practices, 100% of home games. Returning student trainers are 90% of practices and 100% of all the games. There might be the odd conflict in there with an exam or something. They know that they need to get that covered. They've all kind of been, they're well versed in making sure that everything is covered every practice. So they're not just leaving your team high and dry. They should be communicating that with you guys as well. And then amongst themselves, they'll have their own little practice coverage schedule. But they'll be there at all the practices. So they'll be the ones that will first notice an injury. And then they can contact us and let us know so-and-so got hurt at practice last night. Are they able to come in for therapy? You guys will obviously likely know that as well, because you would have seen them get hurt at practice. We'll book them in with our first available slot. Again, having 4 of us allows us to get athletes in sooner, especially knowing that we're only treating the in-season athletes during this time. You can imagine the fall is pretty chaotic. If we need to refer that athlete on to see the doctor, like I said, Dr. McQuaig will be in once a week, and then we'll have his clinic just down the street where we can send athletes. We can arrange that, no problem. Accessibility, which I'll talk about on the next slide, but just briefly. So in the past, we've used accessibility if someone is concussed. So they're going to have a hard time likely going to class and sitting under fluorescent lights or staring at a screen now these days. So we contact accessibility to let them know that we've diagnosed them with a concussion, and then there's a pathway that accessibility can work with us towards, so that the kid isn't failing an exam and then after the fact saying, oh, but I was concussed. So we kind of preempt that by reaching out to accessibility ahead of time. And accessibility also works if someone, has broken an arm and they're in a cast and they can't type. So that's another thing that they can help us with. Dr. Kim Dawson is going to help us this year. So we've talked a few times, Kim and I, about doing an injured athlete seminar, maybe we could call it. We'll send out more information to you guys once we kind of nail down the time. But our thinking is to have a monthly get together, I guess, of athletes who are injured. They can come together and kind of, it's easier for them to talk to their peers about what it's like being injured than it is for me to say, oh yeah, you tore your ACL, your knee's going to be sore, we got to ride the bike, we got to do this. If they're in the room with someone else who's torn their ACL, they can be like, oh my God, I was at that point last week, it sucked, but then you do this and then it's better. So part of our goal is to have those athletes kind of connect with each other. It happens occasionally on the same team. Football last year had a pile of ACLs, unfortunately, all kind of back to back. But sometimes you're the only person on the team that's injured and you don't really get to, you don't have any of your peers to kind of talk to, and maybe they don't want to talk to us or they don't want to talk to the coaches. So Kim and I are going to work on a plan, what it's going to look like. Maybe it's coping strategies, maybe it's a chance to just kind of talk through it. We're also going to kind of, with that, work on a plan that will involve you guys. So, in the past, we've kind of told athletes, yeah, even if you're injured, you should go to practice. You should be there. You should be with your team. But maybe your athlete is injured and they've torn their Achilles and they're in a walking boot and crutches and it's the winter and they have to get downstairs at the pack. Maybe that's too much to ask an athlete to come to practice 5 days a week. So we'll work with you guys kind of on an individual basis with your athletes, and what does it look like moving forward with their injury? Should we be expecting them to come 5 days a week? Can it be once? Can we count a workout with Andrew as they've checked in you know, instead of going to a practice? How do we keep them engaged while still feeling part of the team without overloading them? You know, like they don't all have cars, so getting to practice while you're injured is a chore sometimes. So can we, you know, be flexible with that? And some teams are already, I know that, but we'll work with you guys to kind of come up with the best plan. And yeah, more information will come out about our monthly injury seminars as well. And then in terms of our communication, some of you may have seen an invite in your inbox from Hoffer today for our weekly check-in meetings. That'll be with myself or one of our other ATs and Andrew and a specific coach, but there'll also be regular communication between us and you guys in terms of injuries. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out. We kind of each have our different ways of doing things. I've done spreadsheets in the past that are on a Google Drive that coaches can look at from at any time of day just to see the status of their athletes. Or it can be a daily phone call or a daily text message or whatever kind of works for you guys. But our goal is to keep you updated so you don't show up to practice and wonder why 4 people aren't practicing that day. You guys would have known that ahead of time. Moving forward, so again, Kim and I were kind of talking about this and looking at the whole athlete and not just an injured ankle or whatever. We're trying to catch all aspects of their health. So there might be times where the student trainer or one of us or one of you guys might notice just kind of a change in the behavior of your athlete, whether it's associated with an injury or not. Maybe someone is generally really outgoing, and for the last 3 or 4 practices, they've been kind of down, but if you ask them about it, they say they're fine. Feel free to let us know. We have avenues. Marshall's also on this call that we can connect with your athletes, and whether it's directly to counseling services or, like I said, anything as part of the campus wellness umbrella, we have avenues where we can help your athletes, and they might not feel like they want to ask you specifically for help. So that's where, like I said, our student trainers come in because they're there every day. So if they notice that someone is kind of a little off for a couple days, they know that they're not trained to solve that. So they can, you know, they can reach out to us, we can reach out to the athletes. And again, that can be myself, my team, Marshall, Kim, and then we can kind of navigate the pathway that we need to take that athlete. Last one, Brian. So these are just a couple other resources on campus. I've mentioned them a few times. So counseling services, we've had a great relationship with them in the past. They can see both urgent and non-urgent appointments. Student athletes are obviously more than welcome to call themselves if they want to set up an appointment. If they're not comfortable doing that, we can do that for them. We are also able to walk them over to counseling services if they don't even think they can do that by themselves. Lots of avenues. Again, this is a lot more of Marshall's wheelhouse. He's really good at navigating this for us. But we're happy to answer questions and do our best to help your athletes navigate that. And the last one, like I mentioned before, accessibility. Marshall, Lauren, and I met with Laura Myers from Accessibility a few weeks ago. She's actually going to come to our student athlete orientation. If not her, then a member of her team, just to talk about the resources that accessibility has. Like I said, we've used them in the past strictly for concussions, but obviously, you know, if someone, like I said, breaks an arm and they can't take notes, accessibility can help. But another thing somebody.
So I'm just marshalling, making sure there's no issues. Kind of a good spot because I see them all.
Can someone mute? Someone needs to be muted.
And ask me. Sorry?
I think, Brian, you can control that.
Yeah, I just volunteer with the junior tour out here.
Good, thank you. So one other thing that we learned in talking to Laura is that there might even be an athlete who has been abused by a peer, and they might be in the same class with that person, and they might feel very uncomfortable going to that class, seeing someone who they're not comfortable being around. And accessibility actually has ways that they can help that student, kind of no questions asked. They don't need to file a report. Nothing has to be proven, quote unquote. But that was something I didn't realize accessibility could help with. So that kind of falls under the safe sport category a little bit. But just to put that on everyone's radar, that is something that accessibility can help us with, and Laura or someone from her team will actually talk about that in the student athlete orientation, which I think is happening in September. So that's all I had on my list of how we operate. Does that bring any questions up for anybody right off the bat? If you think of anything later, obviously feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Laura. Any questions for Laura? So hopefully you can tell, like Laura took over for Rob. Some of you have been around here long enough to remember Rob, and we're evolving, and Laura's done a lot of work over the last number of years, just looking at what we can do from a therapy side and restructuring a bit, and ultimately looking to offer the best supports we can to you and the athletes in the program. So great stuff, Laura, really appreciate that. So the last thing I'll comment on, and if you have some questions, you can ask them now, is the OUA Safe Sport. So that was sent out as a reminder for this meeting. If you haven't seen that yet, your athletes have been notified, is that this is from the OUA, all OUA athletes, coaches, staff, timekeepers, et cetera, anyone who comes near the OUA sport in all sports is required to do Safe Sport training module, which is approximately a 90-minute module. It's free. Enrollee and all the other athletic directors are going to be expected to sign off on confirmation that anyone involved within their department have done it. So you will hear constant reminders for you and your staff and your athletes, and anyone who thinks about being involved with your program needs to do Safe Sport. So don't please hold off and wait. And is this real? It's real, and you will need to do it. So we none of us are rolling yet, even though it's coming soon. So please encourage you to do it and get it done, and encourage your staff and anyone who reports directly to you to do that. Overall, hopefully you can tell that we are working hard to continue to grow, build efficiencies and what we're offering within our athletic department. Your feedback and support, especially through the excellence portion that we did over the last kind of couple of years, has been really helpful, and we want to continue to grow that. And that is all we have. So any questions at this point?
Can I just add something that I forgot?
Yeah.
The OUA released a statement today saying that vaccines are no longer, or they're not mandating vaccines for COVID. That's not to say that won't change in the future. Last year at this time, we were scrambling to get everybody to upload their vaccines. We are currently not worrying about that right now. However, that doesn't mean the university might come out with something. Haven't heard anything one way or the other. So we're obviously encouraging people to stay up to date with their vaccines, but nothing is mandatory. So if you're having any incoming athletes asking questions, I had a few reach out to me wondering what the status was. And so now we can say that the OUA isn't mandating it, but again, who knows what could change, 2 weeks from now. But as of today, they put out an official release. So again, if you have any questions that are related to COVID or vaccines, shoot me a message. Thanks.
And I'll do my best to summarize. Thanks, Laura. The key information and this presentation, and get it out to an email either, hopefully within the next 24 hours, so that you can see a bit of summary. And then obviously we encourage questions and as we go along. So thanks again, everyone. Good luck in your final prep as we get ready to roll, and look forward to seeing everyone back in action. Cheers.